So today we're celebrating the feast of St. Mark, the Evangelist, a key figure in the early proclamation of the gospel. Although he wasn't one of the 12 and probably didn't write his gospel as an eyewitness of the risen Lord, nevertheless he was very closely associated with St. Peter, who, as we heard in the first reading, referred to Mark as my son. This close relationship between Mark and Peter, coupled with similarities in the structure of Mark's gospel and St. Peter's presentation of the gospel in Acts chapter 10, led to a number of early patristic fathers, such as Clement of Alexandria and Tertullian, to suppose that Mark's gospel enjoyed St. Peter's particular approval. Moreover, if that doesn't suffice to emphasize St. Mark's significance, we can also note he was closely associated with St. Paul and St. Barnabas as well, accompanying them on missionary journeys. But what was it that Mark was so concerned to communicate to believers? Well, in a nutshell, it's about our Lord's identity. 2 points in particular, I suppose. First, that whilst Jesus is the Messiah, his identity as such is somewhat concealed. Jesus is the true Messiah, but he would liberate his people from Satan, from suffering, and from sin. He wouldn't liberate Israel from Rome or re-establish the earthly Davidic kingdom. Rather, the Messiah's true identity would become clear to all through his example of service and suffering. Secondly, St. Mark wanted to show that our Lord Jesus was the divine Son of God. And as a result, he takes great care to proclaim Jesus as such at the very beginning of his gospel. Indeed, there's then a trajectory through that. A little later in the gospel, St. Mark has demons acknowledging our Lord as the Son of God. A bit further on, God the Father himself proclaims it. Later still, our Lord affirms it. And then finally, at the foot of the cross, a Roman centurion confesses it. But once one becomes aware of this, that our Lord is the Son of God, the next step is to proclaim it to the ends of the earth. Strikingly, though, there's a slight twist or a sting in the tale of Mark's gospel. In the verse immediately preceding our Lord's commission of the 11, which we've just heard, our Lord criticizes the 11 for not reacting quickly enough to the news of his resurrection. The point our Lord is making is that they can't stay where they are, however much they might wish to. The truth has been communicated to the 11. They now have a responsibility to communicate that truth to other people. Indeed, perhaps Mark's greatest insight, one could argue, is the urgency with which he thinks the gospel needs to be communicated to the world. And let's face it, he certainly wasn't wrong with that.